This, as you mentioned, is so important. Honestly, it's just as important as care because the two go hand in hand, and I really am trying to set everybody up for success. So the one thing that I always tell families is just knowing what the assets are is important, because sometimes if somebody has recently acquired power of attorney and they're like, there's 12 checking accounts and I don't know where this is and that. So just get a handle on what income there is, what assets there are, if anything's in a trust, property zone, things like that. That's number one.
Hey y'all, it's Kosta. Today, I'm here with my guest, Jenny Kenderes, President and CEO of Senior Living Placement, speaker, educator, and author of Navigating the Next Chapter. Today, we're talking about how to understand the three keys of senior living: care, budget, and location. Welcome, Jenny. Would you start by telling us a bit about your personal journey into the senior care industry and what led you to start Premier Senior Solutions?
Thank you so much, Kosta. It's an honor to be here. I love your show. And yes, I'm very passionate about what I do. So I've worked in the healthcare space in some capacity for over 25 years. And seniors, assisted living, hospice, really the senior genre has just been what I absolutely love doing. And working in an assisted living, I saw families struggling when they were making these decisions, particularly the referrals that were coming through. And myself as the sales director in a community, I often felt they were maybe misguided, not properly directed to my building and what was appropriate for the patient or the senior and their families. So I saw a lot of inconsistencies and misinformation going on in the industry as we know it happens. And I kept thinking there has to be a way to do it better and really give them that red carpet service and hand-holding from start to finish and beyond. So after, wrestling with the decision for a while, I finally decided to start my own placement company, and it's been 5 years next month.
Amazing. And I am so fascinated to hear more about what a placement company does in detail, because I feel like, especially in the state of Tennessee and really a lot of states around the United States, there's just a lot of people kind of navigate this alone. So I'm so glad to see that there's these conduits that are being created where people can get the support from individuals who have worked in the industry, who understand the industry, the dynamics of it, so that it doesn't feel so scary when they get started. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And to your point also, yes, I think having worked in the industry helps, because not only do I have the sales background, I was acting executive director for so long too. So having that operations background, working, with the clinical team, knowing what goes on behind the scenes is really helpful for the families up front too. And basically the way I describe it, the easiest way to describe it is like a realtor for senior living.
Nice.
A lot more goes into it, of course. This is certainly not like buying a house or buying a vehicle. This is somebody's life, but really just getting to know that senior, their family, what their needs are, which I know we'll talk about all of that, and then just walking them through the process. It could be I'm helping them, logistical things like finding movers or, best practices for moving day,
Sure.
Caregiver burnout. There's so many things that really encompass this journey.
So with over 25 years of experience in healthcare, I'm curious if you would share some insights into how the industry has evolved and how it has influenced your approach to senior living.
That's a great question. It has definitely evolved, definitely has gotten more competitive over the years. I think that,
Okay.
and I know you and I have had some conversations about this too. I think that some opportunities have come from maybe some investors or somebody that necessarily isn't in the senior living industry. But again, hence the competitive nature of it, there's more and more senior living communities going up. But what I love that's been done over the years is what our parents and our grandparents traditionally thought of a senior living community was a very institutional, like nursing home, which it really was. And it was very scary. And they were very apprehensive, understandably so, about going there. So what I love is that senior living over the years has combined both a social model and a medical model into one. And it's been such a positive experience. It doesn't necessarily change how I refer as I do what's right for each individual family, but it makes it more exciting, I think, to see them thrive and really, be in an environment that's great for them.
I love that. And I'll tell you, the change from institutionalization, or kind of what they call in our industry facility-based care, right? I'm sure people that are navigating long-term care have heard that word a lot, to the community living or even aging in place.
Yes.
I mean, how often do you have to work with people that just need help finding a agency for their own home? I mean, so that they can remain in their home. Does that happen
Daily.
pretty often?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I am happy to do that, because a lot of times when families reach out to me, as you know, they're not quite ready for assisted living, and that's okay.
Right.
I want to put whatever, like I said, best practices or security measures in place, if that means staying at home and referring them to a reputable agency, or maybe it's hospice, or, really any sort of anything that we could protect them to keep them in their home. So absolutely, I meet them where they're at on this journey. And if they're not quite ready for assisted living, that's okay too.
That's great. Today, we're talking about the 3 pillars of finding the best senior living: care needs, budget, and location. Let's start with care needs, since that's normally what brings people into this space abruptly. Generally speaking, how do you recommend assessing an individual's care needs?
You're right. It is what brings them into this space abruptly many times. A lot of times my clients or families are in crisis mode. So we're sort of reverse engineering and working backwards a little bit. But in terms of assessing somebody, I just really want to see where they're at, both physically and cognitively, because even though assisted livings, as we've talked about, have come a long way from the institutional like places, they do have different requirements. Most can handle like a nursing home can, but I want to make sure that when we're looking at what a potential resident's day-to-day life is like, we're looking at physical ailments, or, care needs, or diet, and then even the social and emotional needs, to really make sure that we're placing them appropriately. So it's kind of an all hands on deck approach in regards to looking at care. Sometimes if it's dementia and it's gone along a little bit faster, progressed a little bit faster, we're looking at a different situation. So it just really depends on each family and what they're going through.
How hard is it to find placement in a facility? Like, has the pandemic and just the overall increase in demand made it more challenging to find the right fit, especially with people with complex medical needs? Is it hard to find placement for those individuals?
If you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said it's a little bit more challenging. It is definitely easier today. Again, I think because assisted living facilities realize that they want to offer this social model and this medical model coming together. And even though there's misconceptions still that they cannot do this type of care, they really can. So it's actually not that difficult to place based on everybody's need. There are many communities that will take a higher acuity of care, 2-person transfer, Hoyer lifts, things like that.
I may wait to ask this question when we're talking about the placement agency, but I want you to start thinking about it now. I am so curious about kind of the difference between an assisted living and a nursing home. And so as we talk about your agency, I'd love to get your take on kind of the stark contrasts. And you see it from so many different angles. I think a lot of people, they think of nursing home, they think of just like, okay, if I'm on government funded benefits, then I go into a nursing home. Otherwise, if I can pay for it out of pocket, then I go into assisted living. But there's so many other distinctions to it as well.
Right. And sometimes they don't even understand that. They use nursing home as sort of an all-encompassing word. So you're absolutely right.
Good point. We'll get to that. After we've assessed care needs, we need to look at our budget. What's your best advice to help families navigate the financial aspects of senior living and understand what expenses they need to prepare for?
This, as you mentioned, is so important. Honestly, it's just as important as care, because the two go hand in hand, and I really am trying to set everybody up for success. So the one thing that I always tell families is just knowing what the assets are is important, because sometimes if somebody has recently acquired power of attorney and they're like, there's 12 checking accounts and I don't know where this is and that. So just get a handle on what income there is, what assets there are, if anything's in a trust, property zone, things like that. That's number one. There's programs that a lot of people aren't aware of, like veterans programs. I know you're very familiar with them. There's different there's traditional Medicaid, like you talked about in a nursing home, and then there's different assisted living Medicaid options. So again, based on where everybody's at and how we can stretch their money, that's going to determine what type of assisted living facility or memory care we refer to, because they all have different stipulations.
Are you engaged in the process of the spend down for Medicaid, and also or engaged in setting them up with someone that can, create a trust to try and shield those assets to prepare for more expensive, long-term care stays?
Absolutely, especially because this look back period that not only the VA but Medicaid has of 5+ years, I really don't want anybody caught up in that. So I do my best. Yeah. Although I'm not an attorney, I certainly refer to elder care attorneys or financial planners to help with that trust and allocation and things like that. But certainly I want them to have the knowledge at least and understand what their options are, and yes, how we can go forth spending down money towards their care.
Is it hard to navigate the VA system?
It can be. I will say it is much easier if you have, a professional do it for you.
Right.
I think with assisted living in particular, and even home health care, there's the VA aid and attendance benefit, which I swear you probably run into this all the time. I feel like nobody knows about it, which enrages me.
It's the craziest thing. Yeah. Because it's not just for the person that's served, but also for their family members.
Yes, it's an incredible benefit.
Right.
And I get so angry.
And nobody takes advantage of it.
No, I'm like, this is so well deserved. So I feel like that is a little bit easier to navigate, maybe because there's not as much of an influx of people, going for it. Yes, the VA can be complicated. I'm not going to lie, and I always tell everybody turnaround time, and I don't know what your experience is. I would say for approval, if you're, under the asset limit and you're applying for that particular benefit, anywhere from 3 months to 9 months, worst case scenario. So definitely some time.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 to 8, but
there you go.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why a lot of people, and I think it's just important to talk about VA, because I had an individual on my show it was around last year, and we talked a lot about VA benefits, the aid and attendance benefit, and kind of getting the word out. We haven't talked about it in a while, and so I think it's important to take note. Yes. The main reason why a lot of people don't engage in VA benefits is because of obviously not understanding how to get started, but more importantly, the lag time between, qualifying and then, finding an agency that serves the VA population. Because there's a lot of agencies that don't serve that population. A lot of them
don't. You're absolutely right. In fact, as far as home care, I have found, at least in Ohio, there's not a lot that do. Assisted living, yes, but home care, really, there's not a lot.
Yeah, well, they have a very archaic administrative process, but
very
that's
much
more
so.
Policy than anything else.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but definitely if you are a veteran or you are a spouse of a veteran, you need to reach out to the VA. And just like you would reach out to them to set up a trust, that you would reach out to somebody like an elder law attorney to set up a trust, that lead time to prepare for what will inevitably happen before end of life, you needing long-term care, it's important to get that process started.
Absolutely. And I think people don't realize too that even if their, spouse that's deceased or whatever the case is, even if they didn't see actual combat, that's okay. There's a lot of people that qualify still.
Absolutely. Finally, let's talk about location, the last piece of the puzzle that will bring everything together. What do you normally need to know about the location preferences of a family you're placing with Premier Senior Solutions, and what should we consider?
Well, families are scattered all across the country, as you know. I mean, it's definitely different than it was 20, 30 years ago. And there always seems to be, in one family at least, there's always one adult child either in town or the one that's power of attorney, really taking care of mom or dad. So that one tends to be the one where the most consideration goes to in terms of location, whether that's, 5 minutes from where that child lives, or maybe it's on their way home from their office if they're driving home and want to stop and visit. So certainly I always take each individual scenario into consideration, but usually it tends to lean towards, I would say, in favor of if there's multiple children, one child. And then, of course, too, I always say, again, situation dependent, care, finances, all that. If we have, 10 places to choose from, maybe this one's a little bit farther away, but I firmly believe in the care there, that may be a different conversation to have.
For anyone that doesn't fully understand how a placement agency works, will you walk us through what normally happens and what information you need to understand the unique needs of each family?
Absolutely. It's such a great question. A lot of people don't understand how it works. So what we do is we are meeting with families that are looking for senior living for their loved ones. And like I said, maybe they're not quite ready yet, but they're at least fact finding and gathering information. So I am looking, for some basic things in terms of who the power of attorney is, if anybody, a brief synopsis of the financial overview. As I mentioned, there could be accounts everywhere, just as long as we have a brief synopsis. What the current living situation is, diagnosis, things like that. And then also the social aspects of it. Is mom or dad, have they been an introvert for 40 years? Okay, we're not going to try to change them now. Is there anything else that's really specific? Are they a smoker? Are they, do they have a cat? So there's various needs to really work with. And then once I've met with the family, gathered all that information, really narrowed down some of the best options with communities that I absolutely trust, because I will not refer anybody to a community that I wouldn't refer to my own family. And I know you operate the same way. And then we will tour them together. I really do act as their concierge, advocate, whatever you want to call it.
That's great.
Negotiate for them price-wise if need be. And then once they've sort of decided which community, I walk them through the assessment process, coordinating everything, making sure everything's set for move-in, coordinating ancillary services, and then checking on them after move-in as well.
So going back to the question that I asked you earlier about the difference between an assisted living and a nursing home, I mean, what are the main differences? And also, in your opinion, given that you spend so much time in both, like, what are the pros and cons of each?
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a huge difference. And I think when people say nursing home, it's what we've historically thought of and what our parents and grandparents thought of. It's very clinical setting. Yes, I mean, there's great qualities in a nursing home. A lot of people go there for rehab after a hospital stay, so there's like a short-term version of it, and the insurance covers that. Typically, in a long-term nursing home, if you will, not always, but a lot of times you will have to share a room with somebody, so it's not a private suite. As you mentioned earlier, if you've run out of money and you need government funds, that is where you can go immediately without any spend down period. Some of them have memory care, some don't, but overall it's going to feel like a more clinical setting. Not saying there aren't good nursing homes, it's just, it feels different. Assisted living, as I mentioned, they've really come a long way and they can handle many, many levels of care. To me, an assisted living, because they even have different regulations under the state. And so they don't have to have, for example, we may have talked about this before, a standard nurse to patient ratio. They can actually staff based on the actual care needs of the residents in the building, because you may have 5 people that are very independent, 5 people that are not. So it tends to be, in my experience, a very family oriented place. It feels homey. It feels comfortable. Everybody's like a big family, the residents' families. There's a lot of gatherings. They know everybody's little nuances. Again, not saying they don't in a nursing home, but you're going to have a private room. It's just, it feels more like an apartment.
Sure, absolutely. And I am curious, do you think that at some point, and I know there is a Medicaid benefit to assisted living in a lot of states, but it usually only covers a small portion of the overall monthly fee for an assisted living facility. So like, for example, in Tennessee, average assisted living starts at about $4,000 a month, and Medicaid only covers about $1,600 of that.
Which is crazy.
Do you think, I know, right? And so, like, in your opinion, do you think that it is necessary for us to start, because I'm asking this question. Let me give a little bit of context before I ask it. In our community, nursing homes are half empty. Assisted livings have a waiting list out the door, every single one. So there is a obvious contrast in terms of where people want to go there. And I think a lot of it, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So I'm sure the quality of care and the environment and just the overall dynamics of an assisted living is better. So Why, in your opinion, do you feel like we try to fit this square peg in a round hole by forcing all these Medicaid dollars into nursing homes when obviously there's a much better alternative in an assisted living environment? And here's the crazy part. It actually is less expensive relative to
Way
what Medicaid pays nursing
like
homes.
half of what they, I mean, it's
Right.
astonishing that the differences in cost. You're absolutely right. I really do think a lot of it is because, especially right now, we're still sort of in the generation of those that had pensions and Depression era babies. So they really did save, and they had the cash.
Yeah.
A lot of them shoved the cash under their mattress or in their walls. And so
Yeah.
the money was there to pay for it. Obviously, times have changed significantly. We're at a much different time in our country financially. So I think that, yes, I think that there's going to have to be a lot of legislation that's really reviewed. I will say in Ohio, it's a little bit better. They will pay for all of assisted living after at least a certain month, even on Earth.
Oh, wow.
Right. Depending on,
Medicaid will.
yes. Now every
Nice.
assisted living has to accept it, though. So it's only certain ones.
course.
But it's wonderful because they
Right.
will pay for it. But yes, I thought it's so interesting that you talk about this, because for the last 5 years, at least, I thought, what's going to happen by the time we get to the point of needing assisted living? There's a lot of legislation, that I think is going to have to be coming down the pipeline. Absolutely.
And there should be a broader conversation. And I know, obviously, we're talking about placement agencies and the dynamics around how placement agencies work, but I'm just going to get on a policy conversation just for a very brief
I love
period.
it.
I feel like you should take best practices, and obviously assisted livings, in terms of a facility-based care environment, assisted livings have adopted the best practices and they have the best outcomes. And so it wouldn't be totally outside of the scope of transitioning nursing homes into assisted living facilities, and even incorporating, like, what our program does is we essentially are the middle between where you age in place and you go into a facility-based care where you're still connected to your community and you live in like a residential setting, like a house with roommates.
Wonderful.
And so you get to not only still be connected to your community, but at the same time, you're able to live in your community on a fixed income, which is very hard for a lot of people.
Very hard. Very hard.
Yeah.
It's nice there's the option, but it is hard.
Yeah, and I think that we're in an inflection point right now, especially in the next 7 to 8 years when we hit this climax of baby boomers, that are needing long-term care. And I think that the conversation is going to become even more pronounced. And I'm glad that there are people who are considering the necessity for helping people navigate how to enter into this marketplace and make the right decisions. Because honestly, I always thought it was up to care agencies like ours to be able to help people navigate, but that's not our job. We try to do the best that we can, but we're still limited on
and I know we go above and beyond because we try to compensate for maybe the information people aren't getting. And it's hard. And I just had somebody say to me on the phone the other day, this really sweet woman, she said, I am by no means an unintelligent person, but trying to navigate the system makes me feel really dumb. I said, I absolutely understand what you're saying. It's hard.
Yeah. And I mean, literally you start, it's like talking to the IRS. Like you start.
Right, that's a good comparison.
And then you have no idea where to go. There's like 10 different options. And the reason I bring this up, I tried to call him yesterday. And it was
so this is fresh on your mind.
My calls.
Right. See?
It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. I know. And then you're so fed up.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to talk about your course, Navigating the Next Chapter. Will you tell us about who you designed the program for and what's included?
Yes, just like we're talking about, anybody that is either going through this with a loved one or going to be going through it with a loved one. And let's face it, we are all going to be going through this at some point. Yes. And trying to navigate this, even just the terminology, is really, really challenging. So, and even back to our earlier conversation, what's the difference between assisted living and nursing home? Some of the basics people don't understand. So I created a course for anybody that has to dip their toe into the system and try to figure out next steps, whether that be staying at home, going to assisted living, what resources to tap into, what this means, what that means. And it's 8 modules plus a ton of bonuses. And it's really, it's VA benefits. It's everything all in one place, because people always say that I don't know where to start, or I get this piece here and this piece of information here. Everything is all in one place for everybody. I wanted to make life as simple as I could for them.
$1 million question. Do you outline what all the different abbreviations stand for?
So sort of, not all of it, because I feel like people would be like, yeah, I'm not even going to have interest of it.
Yeah, right.
I try to, I think because it's sort of interactive with video and, slides. Nice. So I sort of have some abbreviations in there and then maybe spell it out, when I articulate it, yes. But not everything, because I feel like people would just, they don't want to hear that.
No, I agree. And believe me, that's the biggest criticism that I get whenever I try to explain these systems to people who are not a part of, or not familiar with the long-term care space, healthcare in general, actually.
Absolutely.
Is the amount of abbreviations, whether it's
the acronyms,
ALF, right? Acronyms, right? ALF, SNF, even something as simple as a diagnosis code. They're like, what in the world?
I know. And do you find yourself writing out stuff like, I remember I wrote a message to on my chart to my daughter's doctor, and I was writing, HXC/0, and I'm like, okay, well, obviously she gets it, but then I find myself doing it with everybody, and I'm like, okay, I need to not do that. So I get it. It's very complicated.
Yeah, let me tell you what your HCPCS code
is. Exactly. You understand.
Yeah. So we always like to end the show with a call to action. What's your best advice on how to begin researching and collecting the information needed to find the best senior living for yourself or a loved one?
Well, I would say, as much as we all do this, don't Google, because you will get swept up into some crazy national database that you don't want to be in, and you will get inundated with calls, whether it be for home care, assisted living, financial advice that's probably not applicable to your situation. So I would tell everybody, one, to have kind of a general sense of what we talked about earlier, the financial sense, who the power of attorney is, things like that. 2, it's very tailored to each situation. So if they want to reach out to a local placement agency, they can always go on my website, which I'll give you. It's www.premier-senior.com. They can always reach out to me with questions. If they need to have me coordinate with someone in their area for placement, I'm more than happy to do that. For home care, whatever agency they may need. Really just start with somebody who does this every day, and they can lead you in the right direction.